and welcome back to another episode of our podcast. Today's topic is on rethinking healthcare in 2026, a fresh approach to the challenges with patient care. My name is David Levine, founder and CEO of HealthTech Solutions, and I'd like to welcome our guest today, Jacob. So Jacob, if you'd like to take a moment and introduce yourself.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks, David. So I run a company called TransplantCoach.com with a co-founder. I'm in New York. She's based out of DC. And our software platform is to multi-list kidney patients so they can receive transplants much faster, about 5 years faster on average. We work with patients all over the country, and we were going on year 3 of transplant coaching. So that's what we do, and I think that's how we ended up. We sort of found each other and got to this point. And then my background more broadly is in real estate and finance.
Well, sounds great. I can't wait to hear more as we get into this. So we'll just jump right in and start off with our question of the day with the topic. So when you think about the patient experience going into 2026, especially around transplant care, where do you see the biggest opportunities for technology to reduce delays and improve outcomes?
Well, in 2 ways. I think the first is general tech literacy for patients. I think since COVID, there's been a pretty big shift in this move towards telehealth, where patients have been kind of forced, which I think the outcome has been pretty positive, to get more comfortable with tech. And that applies to us specifically because we do not go through, as of this time, any insurance carriers or have pre-authorization. So we're totally direct to consumer. So any kidney patient can come find us and use this patient-centric tech to expedite their own kidney transplant journey. And the second is, I think value-based care is gaining a lot of momentum, and 2026 health tech and the introduction of AI-powered tech products, I think are gonna be the big focal point of 2026. On the provider side, because they're now tied to more quantifiable outcomes, and then patients with how they interact with those providers. I think those 2 ways are going to be pretty massive tech-wise in 2026.
Well, fantastic. Appreciate the insight. So now I want to kind of get a little more back into your business. So I know you mentioned that Transplant Coach helps patients navigate the long and complex transplant wait times. What part of that process did you find most broken when you first started building your platform?
A very specific component of a very long journey, and that's multi-listing. So the normal track is you start exhibiting kidney disease symptoms, you go to your primary, you receive a diagnosis or referral over to a specialist, in this case it would be a nephrologist, and let's say you're diagnosed with kidney disease or kidney failure. You're then typically turfed over to your local dialysis center if you're at that point where you need dialysis, or if transplantation is even really discussed, you go to your local transplant center, which makes logical sense. The problem is how long you wait for a deceased, to be clear, a deceased donor organ as compared to a living one. How long you wait is not, in actuality, this big, long national list that kidney patients are sort of led to believe. It's rather that there are many individual lists, and how long that list is changes based on where you live. It changes based on the supply and demand of that particular region, of that particular city. And it can even change sometimes within one region, one city. So there's this educational gap for patients in knowing that, hey, I'm in New York City at Mount Sinai, and they're telling me it's an 8-year wait. Well, many people will just accept their fate. And in reality, there are half a dozen hospitals with a 2-year or less wait where they can get a kidney in 24 months or less, a 45-minute drive away or an hour flight away. And people just don't know. So our platform fills that education gap in forecasting all of the wait times by hospital, right? Every single one in the country. There's a big map on the homepage. You can see for yourself. And the disparities are they're staggering. It's crazy. And so the second half of the platform being we've automated your ability to list at those hospitals through one uniform medical packet.
All right. No, that's very interesting. So quick follow-up question, because you mentioned, there's like multiple lists, and the perception being that there's typically like one national list. I mean, is there still kind of that, or is there really just more like the regional lists, and then you just have to know to look there? I'm just want to better understand, how that actually is.
Yeah. Well, technically speaking, there is one overarching entity. At least there was, and this entire industry is changing sort of in real time. And this organization was historically led by UNOS, the United Network for Organ Sharing. They've had a contract with the federal government, specifically HRSA, for over 40 years. And there's this large entity that's been responsible for overseeing organ transplantation, organ harvesting, and procurement across the country. So that technically does exist. There's at the national level. But how kidneys are specifically doled out tends to happen more at the hospital level and the regional level. Because a kidney that's procured in Ohio is not going to travel to Southern California. So they had to localize this into different regions. And as a result, you have clusters of folks. The Northeast is a huge bed of very high wait time hospitals. If you look at the homepage, there's all these red dots in the top right. Many parts of Texas and pretty much all of California is just red. It's the whole state, aside from one or two hospitals that are a bit lower. And so you have these giant swaths of people who simply are led to believe that their only option is to stay where the wait time is 5, 7, or 10 years. And it's just not the case. Now, to caveat, how much wait time you have, which is based on when you start dialysis, isn't the only factor that decides who gets the kidney, right? They choose kidney recipients based on highest and best use of the kidney. But it is a major factor. And so if you're in San Francisco, and I love California, but if you're in San Francisco, you're going to wait 10 years for a kidney most of the time. Whereas if you flew to Las Vegas 2-3 hours away, you might only wait a year to a year and a half, which is specifically in this case, with this illness, is life-saving because the mortality rate on dialysis kind of skyrockets past that 3 to 5 year.
Okay. And so your platform bridges patients, hospitals, and multiple data sources. So what does your operational workflow look like today? And how do you keep everything running smoothly behind the scenes?
Well, my co-founder gets the credit for that. She's a software engineer, and so she runs and manages the platform on the back end, there's really two key components to it. The first is the algorithms that she's built and the mechanism for pulling the federal data that allows us to forecast. We don't just make it up, right? We take data that the hospitals are required to submit to the government, every hospital in the country, and then we take that master file of data and we run algorithms against it to forecast and to give insights by hospital. Not only the wait time by blood type, but as well, what's their historical volume? How many transplants did they do last year? How many were deceased? So on and so forth. So that's the first part. And the second component of the platform that she manages on the back end is the uniform medical packet. It's like a ply board for colleges where we have all of the hospital applications coded on the platform and one application, which I do with the customers together. I do it for them on a Zoom call. We can use that one application to apply to 3, 5, 10, 15, as many hospitals as is necessary. So the workflow is someone finds us either through friends and family, healthcare referral, their doctor said to check us out, their social worker, or through social media. We do a lot of like TikTok and like short form content, or Google ads, paid ads. They come to the website, they see the testimonials, they see the video, they see the workflow of what multi-listing is. If they're interested, they book a call, they chat with the team. If they're a good fit, then we schedule the 1-hour Zoom call and we discuss with them which hospitals make sense, and then we get them sent off. That's our entire workflow.
All right. I appreciate that. And since the transplant journey involves high-stakes data and constant communication, what are the biggest day-to-day challenges that your team faces as you continue to scale the platform?
Well, anything in healthcare, I'm sure you've seen your clients and you've seen, is there's such a big emphasis around the security of data, especially with HIPAA compliance. And yet again, that's more for my co-founder, Irina, but there's a ton of work that goes into making sure that the platform is secure and HIPAA compliant. So that's always a big concern for us. But we keep it to be a very standardized flow. We don't have patient data on our personal desktops, things of that nature. So I'd say that's how we're keeping up at the moment.
Appreciate the insight. So before we kind of get off talking about the business, I did want to ask, because I am very curious, so why the choice to just focus on the kidney transplants? Is it just because of how that operates versus, other organ types, or are there plans at some point maybe to look at other organ types?
Well, both of us have the personal story of kidney failure. I had kidney failure myself, and living in New York, I shortened my wait time from 7 to 8 years down to a year and a half by multi-listing. And she did the same thing, just in a different city. So kidney was always going to be our first sort of mountain to climb, but we're not entirely sure yet. We'd like to include other organs, but we have to make sure that kidney is done right and it's done correctly and at scale. which is still it's a big mountain to climb. So from a tech standpoint, adding liver would not be particularly complicated because the concept of forecasting based on wait times from federal data, which is our biggest sort of lead magnet, the idea of a uniform medical application, flipping all of that over to liver or to, I would say liver, heart and lung are at such lower volumes. I think they'd be a whole different game, but liver would be potentially doable. We'll just have to see how the roadmap sort of unfolds as we finish building this thing. But it would be excellent to at least include liver.
Okay. And I'm assuming this is all based on, because you mentioned earlier on, organs from deceased individuals. And I assume that's a primary focus, and I'm assuming this doesn't really take into account anyone who wants to do, like, I think is the term, a living donation?
Yeah, we do get people with living donors. It's not our specialty, it does happen, mostly because if you have a potential living donor, I have a spouse, a husband, a cousin who's willing to donate, that's excellent, that's amazing. That's obviously the preferred option. Most don't, right? The majority of people who receive kidneys, they are not from living donations. But if you live in a high weight area and you have a living donor, a lot of people will still multi-list because they've sort of hedged their risk there. Because if the living donation works out, great, awesome. If it doesn't, because they're not a match, they can't pull off a paired donation, or they just change their mind, they still have the lower weight for a deceased kidney. So they're kind of covered in both ways. So we do see them, that they do come in, they do use the platform, but there are other platforms that specialize in living donation specifically. And that's what they do, and they're good at it. So, we try and keep our heads down on the deceased donors.
So I just, thinking about it, and when I was reading up about what you do, I was just very curious about that, and probably just, at least personally, because, I find it very interesting. Again, I know I enjoy watching a good medical drama and knowing a lot of that maybe isn't entirely accurate, but I'm sure they get a lot of it close enough. So I do find it this very interesting and fascinating.
Yeah. Same.
So I want to transition to a little bit more about yourself. So what part of leading a transplant coach energizes you the most, such as whether that's from the building technology side, shaping the vision, or seeing the real world impacts on patients?
Well, there's a couple different things that I think keep us going. And in the day-to-day, sometimes we have to remind ourselves of them. We've chosen to build a business that is in one of the most difficult industries to build in healthcare, let alone health tech. And we've decided to take a product that people might argue would be better as a B2B product, like selling to DaVita or selling to other entities. We've taken it directly to consumers, which are typically the harder demographic of people to sell to, because no one else is going to do it if we don't. Unfortunately, because of the different incentive structures of kidney disease and the system here in America, it's difficult to offer this product in a way that's going to help patients unless patients are the ones actually using it and paying for it. So that's been a bit difficult to climb, especially because we see the stories every day. We'll take multiple consults every day, and we've both lived them. They're very difficult stories of, I had this great life, and then everything just started to fail out of nowhere, and now I'm chained to a dialysis machine 4 times a week, and it's a lot to deal with on a daily basis. But we do it because we understand what it feels like to be in that chair, and the patient stories are, they make it quite worth it for us. I mean, obviously we want to do this profitably in a way that we can expand and grow, but it took a while to get there, because if my value proposition is, hey, I can take you from a 7-year wait down to a 2-year wait, well, that means I have to wait 2 years from everyone that I've taken care of to even start to see those results. And now, 2-3 years in, they all started coming back. So now we have these video testimonies of people who are like, yeah, I was at this 5-year wait and I got it in 1.5. So that has been a huge boost for us. And the second is, it's a massive market. It's a huge opportunity. It's, although tragic that kidney disease and other illnesses are on the rise year over year in America, it's a huge group. And we're looking at 1,000 people on dialysis alone. And then you talk about, the 90 to 100,000 people listed, probably not even listed in the right places to begin with, where they're actually going to get a kidney. So we have a very large group of people to work with, and we haven't even scratched the surface yet. So I guess the short answer is I'm very excited by the growth opportunity of all the people we can help. And then I think what keeps us going largely is the testimonials and pretty overwhelmingly positive reviews we've gotten so far on the site.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. I mean, it is, I don't know that I've come across any other individual or business that is kind of doing something like what you're doing so far. As you mentioned, there may be others, but it sounds like there's really not a lot of people kind of doing something like this currently to help those who really have a high need for, getting help.
Yeah, it's and I get why. It's not easy to sell directly to consumers. And I don't want to generalize, but usually if the make the most money path is more building software to sell to hospitals or to sell to providers or to sell to dialysis companies. So our intention in the long term is to have both, is to always be the direct to consumer, the place where patients can go, and then also have a sort of provider-based side of the business with a dashboard that offers the same tools if they want to use it in-house at nephrology clinics, for example. So our intention is to have a bit of both.
Awesome. Well, kind of then speaking about that, I think it's a good segue to kind of getting and talking about initiatives that you have going on. So now you kind of just mentioned you want to look at getting into the provider side. So just curious on that, if you have any sort of like current timetable or idea of when you might get there as well.
Yeah. So these journeys aren't always linear, it turns out. But our sort of thought here was, let's stabilize and have consistent revenue and a consistent patient base. One, because it gives us a really strong foundation, it gives us a strong financial foundation, and it gives us a strong credentializing. Like, hey, we've done this 100 times, we've done this 1,000 times, and here are the results. So that's phase one, and we're about halfway through that. I can throw out the timetables. In a perfect world, I'd say maybe 6 months we'll wrap that up. However, we have also, in different intervals, tested the water on the enterprise route, specifically with value-based care. And it's a difficult one. It's a very difficult one because the medical industry is attempting to shift towards a value-based care model where providers are more incentivized via bonuses and cost savings to improve patient outcomes as compared to a standard benchmark from CMS. But I think they're still trying to work through the pricing mechanisms behind that. Because on the surface, it's like, well, if we can save you guys $70,000 a year on dialysis by transplanting someone 3-5 years sooner, well, that sounds like a no-brainer, right? We can go in and per patient, we're able to multi-list because not everyone's eligible to multi-list, right? You have to be physically capable of traveling and have a couple other factors too. That sounds like a great business. But so far, the pricing mechanics with value-based care from CMS, we haven't found the way to most cleanly get in there. And that's okay because we're still working on the direct-to-consumer side of the business. That will include a couple more hires. It will include a bit higher on our ad spend. And we will get there. And once we do, then we can dedicate full force to what's the right way to get into VBC. But ultimately, that would be our next step after direct-to-consumer. We can attempt to just be that and only that and scale up to as much as Google ads or as many people will hear about our stuff. But I think there's a happy medium there. The dialysis side we tried as well with like DaVita, for example, and we had a lot of great conversations with them. They were looking more, though, to address a slightly different side of their business, which is more on preventative, like pre-dialysis education, which I think is great. It's not what we do, though. We're more for if you're going to need the kidney, if that's the requirement, no matter where you are in your journey, then we will find you the fastest place to get it. That is our value proposition. So in a perfect world, we'd have both in the next 30 days. But, as you know, as a business owner, these things take time to build.
Yep, that they do. And so is it just currently you and your co-founder, or do you have more of a team at this point?
Just us two. Fully
Oh,
bootstrapped.
that's impressive.
Fully bootstrapped. And at some point, finishing up phase one, we'll only require a couple of hires, a couple of transplant navigators, we'll call them, who can step in and take our 20-minute initial consults and then as well fulfill if someone wants to buy the service. So we'll hire 1 to 2 people to do that. And I'd say 1 customer support specialist, ops manager type of role. And that's about it. Unless there are other developer initiatives my partner wants to take on, that's probably where we'll need to be.
Well, that sounds good.
Not very operationally heavy compared to other businesses, that's for sure. Not as operationally heavy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that can definitely have some benefits for obviously operating, and maybe that allows more time to focus on, the patients and those who need the help versus we got so much of these, administrative overhead to do that. Yeah, it could sometimes hinder the patient care side or working with the patients.
Of course. And then it's easy to turn into a overly bureaucratic company with way too much management oversight and just all this. So I'm very grateful, extremely grateful for that. Would it be helpful if I talked through our business model of how we make money? I don't know if
I
we
mean,
touched on that.
yeah, I'm open to that because I'm sure there's going to be some in the audience who might find it interesting and fascinating. So especially if someone's wanting to understand more, and maybe you might inspire someone else who's interested in doing this, and if that helps them understand what would be involved, I'm certainly would love to hear it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So for us, it's a pretty simple model. It's almost like a gym model where our biggest lead magnet is the forecasted wait times, either in table form or map form. So you can see all the hospitals by blood type and where to go. So all of those resources are there for free. Anyone can take them, anyone can use them and identify for themselves where they should multi-list and then multi-list. Now that's not particularly easy or fun. I don't know if you've ever tried to call a hospital. It can be pretty difficult, right? Let alone navigate their application process, but it's totally doable. And then if you want the done for you, the 3 months of work it took us compressed into 1 hour, then that's what you pay for. So the gym is free, and then if you want the personal training, you got to pay for that.
Well, I like that. Very simple, straightforward. Well, as we kind of wrap up, I just want to see if there's any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience.
I think we've gone through a lot in the last 30 minutes or so, but I think it's been a really crazy and fun journey, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So hopefully no one in your audience needs this service, but if anyone is interested in learning more about it or collaborating, or they just find this kind of stuff interesting, they're more than welcome to reach out to me via email, via text, whatever. And yeah, check us out, transplantcoach.com.
Well, Jacob, thank you so much for coming on. I really did find this extremely insightful and interesting. And for anyone else who'd like to know more or like to get in touch because you want to help out or do whatever, or maybe you know someone that could use the service, all the information will be in the description below this video. All right, so again, Jacob, thank you so much.
Thanks, David. Bye-bye.
All right, so just so you know, before you get off,